heard a voice in my ear, and it was a female's voice, but it was whispering. I couldn't hear what it was saying, and this is, scaring me as I'm hearing this. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And the voice starts intensifying and getting louder and louder.
Welcome to God's Voice Daily. I'm your host, Vladimir, and this is the channel where I share daily phone calls with people from around the world who've had real supernatural encounters with Jesus, angels, demons, and everything in between. Some of these calls go on to become full episodes on our main show called God's Voice Today, but here you will hear them raw and unfiltered, just the way they happened. So without any further ado, let's dive into today's featured call. Enjoy.
So just to give you a brief summary, so from a young age, definitely had a very intimate relationship with fear and terror. It was one of those things where, even as a small child, I could, hear something creaking at night and it could keep me up for an hour going to get my parents and, trying to come up with a solution as to why I was hearing these things. And they'd have to, tell me like, hey, that doesn't, quite make sense. That's probably not what that is. Try and get back to sleep. I remember watching movies and seeing like scenes that would terrify me. One in particular being like Fantasia from Disney. And it was very strange to me how, something with music and images could have such a vivid effect on me as a kid. But one of the most formative things that really brought on a new form of fear at night, especially when sleeping, was when I was about 10 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night to my mom screaming that somebody was in the house. And it was, in that exact moment, as a 10-year-old child feeling helpless, I'd recently moved upstairs to a new addition we built. I froze. I felt adrenaline pumping through my body. I didn't know what to do, and it was as if time had stopped. And the effects of that night affected me greatly for years. And for the next, I'd say, year of my life, pretty consistently, I'd have to have my mom or my dad sleeping in my room with me because I was so afraid. And, my parents would always catch me like sneaking downstairs to sleep in the living room. I'd even try to find places to hide to sleep downstairs to be closer to them because I did not want to be up there by myself because the fear was so immense. And, then I'd say over the next few years, the dreams would start to become more prevalent and they'd become more intense. There was one in particular when I was probably about 13, if I had to guesstimate, where it was one of the first that became somewhat of the norm, where it would take place in my bed. So it wasn't really like a dream to me. In the dream, it was almost as if I was just where I was at, but I couldn't tell if I was awake or not. And I remember a burning sensation that was under my bed that was intensifying. And in that moment, I was pretty convinced that it was the fires of hell trying to burn me alive. And that terrified me so much. I went over begrudgingly and knocked on my sister's door, and I was bawling. I'm like, please, can I come in your room and sleep in here? Please, please, please.
Wow.
And, at this point, my parents and my family are like, this kid is afraid of everything. And they wanted to help me. They didn't know what to do. But the reason I'm sharing that is, this relationship with fear was so common. And it was particularly at night. I mean, it would be hours of me laying in my bed, experiencing dread and terror that I couldn't face. I couldn't do anything about it because my bed was the one place I felt the most unsafe at night. Dreams like that weren't very common in my younger age. If I did have a dream like that, it would usually scare me pretty intensely for a couple of nights and didn't really have a way of dealing with it, but, I'd figure it out and I go back to sleep and move on with my life. But either way, what I'd share with you is I was raised in a Christian home. So I had faith in God. I had believed that Jesus was my savior, but also around the age of 13 is when I had a new friend that made their way to our school. I became friends with him. I went over to his house. I found out that his dad was a pastor at a church. And over the next years, I became closer friends with my new friend, I started attending church with him. Even though we went to a church of our own with my family, I really liked going here. I liked the youth group that they had, and I became very close to people there. And I would say that my faith grew even more. I joined the worship team, and this continued on all throughout my high school years. So for 5 years of my life, I continued to go there. During that time frame, there wasn't anything too wild. No really intense nightmares or, experiences laying in my bed. Fear seemed to become less normal, which was great. Helped me to move on and get more sleep at night and be a little more well-adjusted. So, trying to see how much time we have. I don't want to talk.
Oh, you're good. Keep going. You're good. You're good.
So, I would say roughly around the time I graduated, which would have been 2009, is when I became a little more explorative in the things I would do recreationally. I never really drank in high school. I didn't smoke outside maybe a couple cigarettes that I didn't like, and I most definitely had not smoked weed before. But so I think it was around 2010 in the summer. I had drank a couple of times with my buddies, one of them being one of my closest friends. He lived at a house by himself where both his parents essentially kind of just moved out and left him there by himself. So we had a whole house on our own, and we weren't really too wild and rambunctious. We weren't crazy, but we were younger adults that were having fun, which led to us drinking. But due to the fact that we were on the worship team at our church and they had found out, they were very upset with us, and they had asked us to come up on stage and apologize and step down from our positions within the worship team. So it was a very disheartening thing for the both of us. We'd felt pretty betrayed. There were rumors and things swirling about us that were definitely untrue, and taking that small thing that we had did and stretching it into something else that it wasn't. We didn't really want to go there anymore. We felt like, the years that we'd invested in that place was kind of just all for nothing, and that the people that we attended there with didn't really see us as who we were. Yes, we had made a mistake, but we didn't feel it was justified to just kind of strip us of everything that, had given us an identity within that church. So needless to say, we went our own way. And as I mentioned to you, we did more things recreationally during this time. So I would drink more often and even got into smoking weed. But conveniently, also during that summer, I had a pretty serious injury. So I had fallen about 15 feet. And when I fell on my side and my head slammed into the ground. And I was knocked unconscious for, say, probably 2.5 to 3 hours with very slim moments of consciousness. I'd remember waking up in the car. Wow. I remember waking up and hearing my friends say, "Hey, something's wrong. We need to do something." I remember asking them why they weren't hurt, because I assumed we were in a car accident of some kind. I remember waking up in the hospital and sharing my personal information and going back out, and then waking up and my mom was there. So what was really interesting is after I hurt myself, I felt that sleep, rest, and recovery would be the best thing for me. So I would try to take it easy, sleep more often. But what would happen over that summer as I was recovering, I would have these dreams that were incredibly intense and even more realistic than what I'd had in the past, where I would be in very normal settings with people, even in the house that I was staying at with my friends that I had mentioned to you. And in these dreams, I would start convulsing, and it would feel like my body was vibrating inside, and the dream would ultimately end with me keeling over and dying. And these dreams were very traumatic for me because I just went through something where I hurt myself, and I thought this was my body's alert system telling me, like, hey, you're not okay and you're not going to make it. So again, afraid to fall asleep at night that I would have these dreams, or maybe I would even die in my dream, and that's what was my body trying to communicate with me. So as I mentioned to you, we were drinking and getting into smoking weed. And one night, because, I felt that smoking weed helped me to maybe escape that way that I felt and the fear that I had when I'd go to sleep at night, we decided to reach out to one of our buddies and see if we could buy some. And he said, "Yeah, I've got someone that can get some weed for you, but, one of you guys is going to have to go with me. My friends didn't want to go. I decided I would go begrudgingly. I went with this guy I really didn't like overly much, didn't really trust, to a dealer's house who I did not know. Instantly upon getting there, I did not like the vibe. It was just very uncomfortable. And we went back to wherever he had his stash of weed, and he insisted that we smoked with him, and we did. And I'd say within about 5 minutes, I knew something wasn't right. I felt that my heartbeat was off. I did not feel okay. I asked if we could go out on the balcony and smoke a cigarette, which we did. And while we were out there, it just worsened and intensified. I found myself on the patio on my knees, clutching my chest, saying, I'm not okay. Something's wrong. We need to go. Can we please go back to my friend's house? Eventually, I convinced the guy that I came with, and he took me. And I really don't remember the drive home. I remember seeing like blurs of light out of the window, things passing by, but I couldn't really make it out. It was at this point that I felt I was losing control of my body. I really didn't know what was going on. We got back to my friend's house, and I ran back to bed, kind of bypassing everyone. They're like, is he okay? They came back and checked on me, and I told my main friend that was back there. He's like, dude, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. Something's wrong. Like, I'm not okay. I don't know what this is. This is terrifying me. You know, I've had all of these issues with getting hurt. Like, I feel like I could actually be dying. And he's like, dude, you're going to be fine. Just sleep it off. And I'm like, okay. So I laid back there, and it was incredibly strange. My body started vibrating very intensely, what I would describe as like a vibration within a video game controller. It intensified so much that it was really all that I felt. And then I started to shift into what I would say was a different plane of reality, where I started seeing things, and it was almost like an animated cartoon with singing, but it was in a different language. And it was like there were these beings there that were trying to communicate with me. I had no clue what they were saying, but I was incredibly uncomfortable because it wasn't my reality that I felt I was in, and I wasn't supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. It kept shifting in between different scenes, and again, I was terrified the whole time. I didn't know what to do. In that moment, I was just essentially the most terrified I had ever been, and just felt victim to this experience I didn't ask for. What we found out later was that was most likely laced. What I had smoked was something like LSD or DMT. I would have never done that if I knew that was the case. I didn't ask for that, but that was an experience that was, I would say, somewhat forced upon me without my knowledge. So what I will tell you is the next few months were not quite the same, because I had started to sleep less overall between the injury that I had had and the recovery I tried to go through, and that experience where I felt I went to a different place really messed me up. So, I mean, I would be staying up as long as I could, as exhausted as I could be, just to fall asleep without thinking about it. And there was one day where I had about 24 hours up consistently, and I was ready to call it quits, and my best friend gave me a call, and he's like, hey, man, I really need your help. I need you to drive down to Nashville with me. I've got to move my dad out of his house. And I'm like, all right, I don't think I can do that, man. I haven't gotten any sleep. You know how I've been lately. This is really important to me. I don't think I'm up to it. Well, he kept calling me and stopping me from falling asleep. I'm like, all right, man, fine, I'll go with you. I'm like, seriously, though, I don't think this is a good idea. He's like, I'm sorry, man, I don't know what else to do. So we went. Not only had I been up for 24 hours or more at this point, I had to drive a total of 12 hours or 14 hours, somewhere between the two, depending on how long the trip took. He insisted that we had someone else come with us because he was going to go with his dad when we got there, and I would be driving back on my own. So we got down there, everything was fine. We started to make our way back, and the person he had come with us, I had known fairly well. Only downside is she couldn't drive. She didn't have a license. So she was really no help to me as far as like taking the load off of me. You know, she couldn't really assist me. She was just there to keep me company. Mm-hmm. And it was during this drive home that I had what doctors would call a panic attack. And I will tell you, it was the most intense sensation of me losing control of my body while being in my normal state. This wasn't an effect I was feeling from a drug that I had taken. This wasn't from an injury that I had had. It was just in that moment, my heart rushed. I could feel the air being sucked out of my lungs, and it was terrifying. I tried pulling over a couple of times to regain my composure. Nothing worked. Called my mom, called my girlfriend at the time, and said, hey, something's not right. I'm not okay. I really, really, really think I'm dying, because that became the new norm for me, based on my experiences. I'm terrified. I'm not okay. Therefore, I'm probably going to die. And I even tried to have her drive a little bit, even though she didn't want to without her license, and it was so bad it made things worse. I'm like, I have to take over. So I had to drive for another 6 hours. While experiencing this, it was not stopping. I didn't really know what to do. Somehow, amazingly, by the grace of God, I made it home, back to my girlfriend's, and I went running inside. She knew I was not all right. I crashed on the bed, and I cried until I fell asleep. While trying to fall asleep, I told myself, I'll be fine. I'll wake up in the morning, and everything will be okay. Well, I woke up the next day, and I felt the exact same way. It was like the quote-unquote panic attack had not stopped. It was like it had continued on throughout my sleep and into the next day. And this was the case for months, and probably even years to some extent. So I would try to do anything and everything I could to make this go away, because it was so uncomfortable. I always felt it gripping at my throat. I felt as if I could not breathe completely. Truthfully, I felt like my body was not my own. I would pray to God and just ask for some type of escape from it. I could not understand why I was going through it. It just did not make sense to me. And ultimately, this led to the first of my many intense spiritual dreams that I had had. And this was the worst one I had experienced in my life. And I remember laying in bed with my girlfriend. We had recently moved into an apartment together. We had found out that we had a miscarriage and that the child was not going to make it. And it had hurt us pretty badly, so I'm dealing with the emotional stress of that and me not really feeling comfortable in my body or that I had any control over it whatsoever. I was trying anything and everything I could to make it stop, as I had mentioned to you, and truly I was just a train wreck, both mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And this one night when I was laying in bed, I was laying on my back. I could not tell you if I was awake or asleep as per usual, but I was in my bedroom setting, very present and very aware. I remember laying there and my body was vibrating very much like it was when I was on that drug or when I'd had some of these intense dreams in the past. And it started intensifying so much. I would say that it was more intense than when I had experienced the lacing of the drug that I had ingested. And again, this is me in my normal state. I hadn't taken anything that day. I hadn't drank. I hadn't smoked weed. And I'm like, oh, great, here we go again. Something's coming. Something's coming. And as I was laying there and this vibration's intensifying, I heard a voice in my ear, and it was a female's voice, but it was whispering. I couldn't hear what it was saying, and this is, scaring me as I'm hearing this. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And the voice starts intensifying and getting louder and louder. So she's no longer whispering, and she's speaking a language I don't understand. I don't know what it is. And if I could best describe it, I would say it sounded like Aramaic, but again, that's just a loose description with the knowledge and information that I have. And in my mind, instantaneous, I'm like, this is something satanic. This is of the devil. I must have been a spirit of some kind, a demon of some kind. And I was terrified. I tried to break out of this dream, and I realized I can't move. I can't move. I can't speak. I can't scream. I can't shake. And this voice keeps intensifying, and the vibration keeps growing with it. And at this point, she's very loudly speaking in my one ear. And then in the other ear, whispering starts again. And this time it's a male voice speaking the same language. And it's also chanting over me, which at this moment I could tell that they were trying to do something to me. I wasn't just, it wasn't happenstance that I was hearing between this conversation of these two. They were there for me. And this man's voice, again, was speaking that same language. The volume is intensifying, and as he is speaking, the vibration is growing. I felt like there was an earthquake within me. And at this point, I felt a sensation at my crotch, almost as if a grabbing. Maybe not necessarily physically, but it gave me a sensation within my body as if I was being touched sexually. And it sent this rush throughout me, like they were trying to please me without my permission. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. I'm trying to escape. I'm trying to leave. I can do nothing. And then I felt a penetration. I'm trying to think of a good word to use here. From behind, if that makes sense. Mm. And again, I don't know if this is spiritual that I'm feeling or if it's physical. Can't really tell, but I am afraid. And as that penetration feeling occurs, I'm slowly lifted out of my bed as it's doing this to me. And I saw myself leaving my body. I don't know if I could see my body directly down below, but I would tell you I was levitating in this moment. And it felt like I was leaving behind myself. And out of all the moments I had been laying afraid in bed at night, this was the worst one I had ever experienced because I was victim to something I never asked for. I considered myself to be a devout Christian. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. And these two entities wanted me for some reason, and I wanted nothing to do with it. So I'm trying to shake. I'm trying to move. No luck. It was like I was a prisoner, and this was my sentence. I didn't understand why. But finally, at some point, I realized I need to cry out to Jesus. There's nothing else I can do. This is the only thing I can think of. I couldn't utter any words. I kept trying and trying and trying until eventually I said it. His name came either out of my lips as I was lying in bed or spiritually. I don't know which one it was. In the moment that I screamed Jesus, I slammed back down into my body, woke up, and I probably cried for an hour. And it was at that moment that I realized that I would never be safe in my bed again. And that was just one of the first few spiritual experiences that I had. But I would say that was the most intense of the many I've had.
Wow. Thanks for watching. If this call caught your attention, wait until you see what's coming up next. It should be on the screen right now. Go ahead and click on that video, and I'll see you there.